Well, first of all, I wanted to say welcome. Thank you so much, folks, for joining, and thank you so much to our presenters, Yiorgos and Lukas, for joining us today for this DiMe Journal Club. The publication we're discussing today is SciKit Digital Health, Python package for streamlined wearable inertial sensor data processing. For folks that have been to our journal club before, we try to make it a very interactive event. We position this as an Ask Me Anything, so please feel free to drop questions in the chat, or at the end of our short presentation, go ahead and pose those questions to our presenters. Just a couple housekeeping notes before I turn it over. And I should also introduce myself. My name is Katie Svobodny. I'm a membership engagement manager here at DiMe, and your host for the journal club today. I wanted to mention before we dive in that today's session is being recorded. So we will post this video and the slides to DiMe's website very soon. As I mentioned, if you wanted to ask a question, either drop it in the chat, or we can open it up for questions after the presentation. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Yiorgos and Lukas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
So yeah, as Katie mentioned, we're going to talk about SciKit Digital Health, which is a Python package that we released that is with the goal of handling wearable inertial sensor data processing in sort of like a streamlined manner, instead of having to pull in multiple different packages to handle all of the analysis. So first off, what are we trying to address with the package is that there's a lot of existing solutions in literature on gait, activity, sleep, etc. But there's a lack of existing implementations from literature or open source implementations. You know, there are packages that do exist, but they often have drawbacks, such as, you know, GGIR is for sleep and activity only, and then the code base is not the most easily extensible code base that's available. You know, our group has released other packages before, such as GatePy and SleepPy, you know, these are one-off one-off algorithms that don't sort of encompass multiple different functionalities. And so that's sort of the last point, is that the last drawback is that a lot of these packages are typically one area only, activity, gait, etc. And so why we chose Python for packaging all of this is it's easily distributable and it's fairly common language. We've also released it as an open source package with algorithms from literature and internal research. Oftentimes with validation against ground truth, even if we haven't been able to publish it yet. With the goal of consolidating common algorithms into one package and repository with a custom framework that handles multiple variations and clean and well-documented code. So starting off, going over what is available in SciKit Digital Health, the general purpose processing modules to handle things like file reading. So currently, you know, we have readers for GeneActive, Activity, APDM, and a couple others, which are all written, or most are written in lower level languages, so that we don't have to wait forever to read files in. Following that, there's a lot of common signal processing features, with again embracing the idea of having a common framework that allows for easy extension and custom features that are computed at the same time as the rest of the built-in features. And again, a lot of these are implemented in lower level languages, so that when we're dealing with multiple days worth of data, we can speed up the iterative process and feature exploration. And then additionally, there's a lot of pre-processing steps that happen for a lot of these algorithms. such as accelerometer calibration and wear detection. And there's also multiple versions of those built into SciKit Digital Health as well. The next of the main big algorithm, or the first of the main big algorithms that we're going to talk about is the Gait algorithm. So we have a lumbar accelerometer based version that provides temporal and spatial metrics, such as stride time and then stride length for the spatial. Some of the quickly going over the details, we're using continuous wavelet transform to detect initial and final contacts, and then an inverted pendulum module to go from those temporal metrics to extract spatial metrics, and then a series of quality checks for each of the steps and strides that we're estimating. So we've also done a lot of gait validation and applied it in certain areas. For example, we've showed good to excellent agreement with the Gait right mat, and then extending it to at home, that there were significant differences between a younger and older cohorts at home. So that we'd see differences in stride length and strides and gait speed when they actually take the sensors home with them, which wasn't always obvious in lab. We also have shown in previous publications that we need a minimum monitoring duration of 3 to 4 days to capture a person's variance and natural variation in gait across a day. We've also extended gait to healthy children and shown that we can also achieve good to excellent agreement with the Gait right mat in this population as well. And then ongoing applications include children with achondroplasia and adults with knee osteoarthritis. So it's definitely becoming a larger area of application, and we've seen good results across different populations, just adjusting some of the expected step frequencies and maximum stride times based upon what we expect given the population. Next up is activity, which is also a really common area. Where the main approaches here are we've looked for wrist accelerometer based algorithm, though it's very similar for lumbar based activity, and we compute all the standard metrics such as MVPA, sedentary light time, and we also have some additional ones such as maximum acceleration observed over different time windows. Similar to GGIR and several other approaches, it's based upon Euclidean norm -1, and then windowing that across in this case a 5-second window is the default. And then all of our thresholds are pulled from previous literature, of which there are many. And then we also compute a couple other endpoints from previous work. And again, in healthy adults, we've seen agreement with other open and closed sourced algorithms such as Actigraph, GeneActive, and GGR. And in progress, we're working on investigating group differences again in that younger and older cohort. And then obviously, it's a very popular and easy way to get a sense of how someone is acting in their daily life. So it's being applied in a broad range of different populations. Third is sit to stand, which again goes back to lumbar and computes metrics like duration and then the sit to stand dynamics and signal smoothness. In this case, this was an algorithm that we previously released also, our group previously released also. That's a heuristic algorithm using continuous wavelet transforms as well. And it actually looks for the sit to stand transfer itself instead of looking for a postural difference. This one has also been validated in healthy and patients with Parkinson's disease, and also has ongoing work in NEOA and cachexia, for example. Yiorgos is going to talk a little bit about sleep.
Yeah, so I guess sleep is kind of my domain. So again, the sleep algorithm in SciKit Digital Health, or SKDH, if you want to be easier. It's accelerometer based as most other things. Currently, what's included is an updated implementation of the sleep pipe package that our group formally released. And that basically uses a combination of 3 previously published methods to provide a more comprehensive set of sleep measures as opposed to using any of them independently. So the first was a paper by Van Hees used for detecting the sleep window. So basically from when the subject or the patient goes to bed to when they get up in the morning. And then for determining sleep-wake periods within that window, we use the Cole-Kripke algorithm. But that algorithm was written with respect to activity counts, which at the time were a proprietary measure. And so we used an open source activity index measure as a proxy for activity counts. And we basically just adapted a threshold so that we could use all of those together to come up with overall sleep metrics. In addition, there's a sleep fragmentation algorithm that's been added. So that wasn't in SleepPy. And so the SleepPy algorithms have been validated against PSG in people with atopic dermatitis, but we're also evaluating the SKDH implementation as well as the additional SKDH sleep endpoints in healthy populations now.
So I'll talk a little bit about this, and then Yiorgos will chime in as well. So the whole package is set up so that everything, as much as possible, interfaces neatly with the rest of the system. So the goal was to set up a common input and output format so that we can chain processes together and chain these modules together and create essentially like a pipeline structure, which ends up being a simple expression of complex or arbitrarily ordered processing steps. In this case, we're using a pipeline to mean like a series of processing steps for generating digital health endpoints. Additionally, all of these algorithms have their own user adjustable algorithm parameters, so that, like I mentioned for Gait, we might tweak some of them depending upon the population we're exploring, if they potentially have a faster stride time or cadence than, what the default is set for. Additionally, this allows pipelines to be saved and loaded for repeatability or documentation down the line. And then this common structure also allows for easily extensible new modules. So we'll go over that in a moment. But you can see on the right, SciKit Digital Health has all of those modules that we just talked about: Gait, sit to stand, the raw data process input and pre-processing. And then from that, you can create the pipelines as you need them. So, we have 3 example pipelines where, depending upon what your needs are, what the input data is, it's very easy to just create a pipeline that matches your needs and can do the processing you need only. So Yiorgos?
Yeah. So for those of you who are familiar with Python or with sklearn in general, you might be familiar with this whole pipeline structure where you create an instance of a pipeline and then you can add steps to that. And so for one of the examples Lukas just covered before, you can see on the right, we have a pipeline representation where it shows, raw data to calibration, wear detection, sit to stand, and then Gait. And then you get all the outputs associated with that full pipeline run. And on the left is effectively the definition of that pipeline. So you can just import SKDH. And then with each line, for the first one, you just define the pipeline instance, and then you can add each step like one after the other. And then if you just do the run command with an example input file, in this case, GeneActive file, then you're basically done. So and as Lukas mentioned, you can, because this is a common structure and there's sort of like a standardized way to add and augment this. If you, let's say, come up with a new module and you make an extension, then you can also add this new custom step to your pipeline. And as long as it follows the input-output definition, then it should work fairly seamlessly.
Yeah, so that extension actually works. We've used it for internal stuff, but the ease of extending is that because we have a public base class that's you can inherit from, it's easy to create custom or one-off extensions for niche cases that might not be included, or you might have your own use cases for. And then because it's using a public base class, as long as all of the requirements are met, it's very easy to mix and match SciKit Digital Health and the extensions in a single pipeline. So you can see you might have a custom data loader as an extension with your custom processing module. But then what you could easily do is you can take the pipeline and build a pipeline that starts with your custom data loader, but then goes into inbuilt SciKit Digital Health wear detection and then sleep analysis, but then finishes with a custom processing module, and all of that will still be handled within the one pipeline. So it makes it easy to extend and mix and match. Finally, I mentioned documentation earlier. So SciKit Digital Health does have full documentation, and it's published online on Read the Docs. So it goes over the full API reference, as well as some other usage and installation instructions. And so for each algorithm, as much as possible, there's some background information about how to add potential custom gait endpoints, terminology that's used for each of the modules, and then how to use that module and what arguments are possible to pass in and what those arguments actually affect. So all that documentation is available online for the package as well. In terms of accessing SciKit Digital Health, as I mentioned, it's open source. The code is available on GitHub, and these links and slides will obviously be available later for everyone. Additionally, we publish to the Python package index, so it's easily installable from pip or Conda, where we also have distributions as well. I do want to mention that right now, because of some of the extensions, there are some issues getting it to work on Windows, just straight from the package index or Conda. But it is possible. I know people have been able to build it before. It's just not quite as straightforward. I did want to mention that. With that, that concludes the presentation part. So we want to thank you and also acknowledge the following colleagues that we worked with who helped support a lot of this work and the validation work that went into this. So with that, if you have any questions, please feel free.
Great, thank you so much for that presentation. I would love to hear from anyone on the line if they are already thinking of ideas on how they can use this tool, or if they've already used it. So please feel free to chime in. I saw a couple people coming off mute. Hi, Rachel, go ahead.
Oh, hi. This is Rachel Chassie, Digital Operations Lead at AbbVie. Thanks, team, for presenting this really fantastic work. I don't have a question, so you guys can relax a little bit, but I do have a comment about one of the reasons why I'm so pleased to see this work. So I'm thinking about that specific slide that Yiorgos presented about sleep. So we, a few years ago, deployed a study using a typical study that we're all doing. So this is not like privileged information, right? Where we stick a wrist-worn accelerometer for some sort of sleep measurement, right? Now, as we know, and the whole reason for this work is, at a certain point in time, a lot of these wearables weren't sophisticated enough to automatically mark start and stop of sleep ethics, right? So we asked folks, before you go to sleep or lay down at night, push the button on the watch, and when you wake up, push it again, right? Whenever I was looking at some of that data a couple of months ago, we had folks push that button dozens of times to start and to stop, right? And one of the specific study I'm thinking of, one of the effects of the condition was joint pain and joint stiffness. And we had someone push the button 30 times once to mark the beginning of it, right? Now that's really disappointing that some folks did that, thinking of the pain and the burden on these poor patients. So I'm really pleased to see this work not only exist, but to be openly available for folks to use. You're really helping move the field forward. And it looks like we're finally existing in the space we'd always had hoped to be, right? The future is now. And I really appreciate y'all making this work available, especially for an operations person on my side. How can we help make our studies more patient friendly? And I appreciate y'all being so open to this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we want to deliver things to patients faster. So if we can all kind of get on the same page about, what methods we're using and what each sleep endpoint means and how we're generating them, and how we're deploying them, then it's going to make conversations with regulators easier, and it's going to make patients' lives better, faster. So I think it's all for the better.
Yiorgos and Lukas, I'm curious to know what is the application about this work that kind of excites you the most? How do you think it can be used in a way that has a great impact on people's lives?
You want to go first, Lucas?
I was just asking if you wanted to go first. I think the most exciting thing well, maybe it's not the most exciting thing, but I think that one of the better things from our perspective in terms of making sure that we're delivering repeatable results for patients and for use is that I think the way it's set up, where you can save pipelines and stuff, will aid us in a lot in terms of making sure that we're documenting what's going into some of these processing steps and aiding in interactions with regulatory boards, or making sure that we are producing repeatable results. Not that it's something that's one-off potentially. It's that we're I don't know if I'm getting across what I want to, but that we can show or aid in repeatability, I guess, is the best thing, or one of the better things here, is that because it's easy to save these pipelines and everything's common, hopefully we end up with more repeatability and showing that these are actually working for patients across multiple populations or different studies, basically. Not that it's just like a one-off result.
Yeah, and for me, it's about making like this remote monitoring and at-home medicine possible, and hopefully passive and comfortable, and then making it widely available, and then also convincing with actual validation regulators that this is a valid way of measuring people's disease progress, and of getting a better idea of what their day-to-day life looks like. And so that's, it's not that a specific disease area excites me the most. It's sort of like, in general, the fact that this at-home and more personalized medicine is kind of moving forward and coming into the spotlight a little bit. And if we can kind of aid that movement in any way with this work or with similar work, then I think that's a win.
Thank you.
Oh, Thanos has so you mentioned productionizing the algorithms. I'm not sure if you mean in terms of like deployment in just a clinical trial, or if you mean in terms of let's say deployment as part of an app or as part of a suite of apps. But one of the things that this has been, especially Python makes this easier, and also the pipeline setup kind of makes it easier, is to tie this in with cloud services. So it's very simple to create sort of like a pipeline structure that's predefined, that has a predefined input and output, and then you package that up basically as a Docker image, and then you can throw that into an AWS pipeline. You can use step functions or Lambda or ECS batch or various services in AWS or analogous services in GCP to handle large amounts of data coming in asynchronously. So, when a file gets dropped in, it can get automatically picked up by one AWS service, passed through whatever pipeline you've had defined, and then the outputs can be delivered wherever it needs to go, depending on the use case. So I think that's, that's another reason, that's another purpose for this common framework and the standardized input output, is as we build these packages and as we create more algorithms and things get sort of accepted, how do we effectively scale this to trials with maybe hundreds of patients or thousands of patients, or maybe even further down the line, how do we scale this, commercially, or how could anyone scale this commercially? And does the basis, like, so this algorithm structure, this setup, does it provide the functionality needed to scale? And I should just say, I want to give kudos to Lukas, because he's rewritten a lot of this stuff in low level C and Fortran. And we've seen speed ups of like, or he has, of like 100x or more. And it's taken things, it's made scalability much simpler and easier. And it's really, it's like decreased development times. It's just fantastic. So it's a big kudos to him.
Thanks a lot for the answer. I mean, currently we have similar infrastructure in our company, Chronicles Health, that we're trying to develop algorithms for IBD, for Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, and we do similar stuff. And we mostly focus on like building infrastructure through AWS steps and stuff there. But I was wondering if you can see something running real time in watches sometime in the future, like developing algorithms directly in the
sort of
watch.
like edge devices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think it's going to
something
depend on the algorithms, right? So a lot of what we've done so far has been, or at least in the past, it's been designed on processing things in batch. So, you get a device that has collected data for the last 3 weeks and you want to process everything. And so things are kind of built around that. But I don't think it's a big step to move from that into something more real time, where you get, let's say, a data transfer daily via Bluetooth or something, or even, more frequently than that.
I was thinking something that you process in the watch, actually.
Oh, like actual live.
Really?
Yeah, it's gonna depend on the algorithm. I'm not actually sure how the deployment would look, moving from something that's in like written in Python as like a pipeline here, to move that to an actual device, like let's say a wristwatch. I'm not even sure you could maintain the same language. It might have to be like a re-implementation.
Just asking if you have this in your pipelines, like when you do stuff.
Yeah, so we don't at the moment, because like Yiorgos mentioned, most of our processing is offline after the fact. And like he mentioned, there's also some algorithms that definitely wouldn't work for, like sleep. You really need to look at sort of the whole night to gain, but like I could definitely, so we don't have it, but I could definitely see how like Gait in some instances definitely could be, put on a watch, obviously with a slight lag time to make sure you're doing all the processing that's required. But yeah, it's not something that we have at the moment, or have looked that much into either.
Thanks a lot.
I have a couple questions. First off, commend you for making this open source. Just wanted to get the backdrop of what went into making that decision of whether this was going to be open source or not.
Yeah, thank you. So a lot of it was sort of the disparate nature that we'd seen with previous work or previous algorithms, where, if everyone has a slightly different definition of what these endpoints are or how to calculate them, that doesn't really aid us in any sort of like regulatory interaction, since a lot of regulatory bodies are already sort of like, they're already approaching this very slowly and cautiously. So I think part of it from our side has been sort of hoping to push for standardization across some of these areas, so that, because that aids us in regulatory interaction. If more people are using at least the same definitions for these endpoints, or for, ideally for algorithms in general, then I think that aids us and it aids everyone in terms of establishing those conversations and showing that what we're producing out of these algorithms is actually really valuable and can result in better outcomes for patients or for clinical trials, in terms of observing those results.
Yeah, and then I mean the other half of that is that pretty much everything that we have here is stuff that has been otherwise published. So if it's our work or if it's others' work, it's really a question of standardizing implementation as opposed to sharing. So like many of these algorithms are out there. They're either they either just lack effective implementation, or they're not easily usable or easily scalable, or I mean, if they're there at all. So now, if you can sort of like consolidate everything into one place and have a standard input output sort of mechanism of previously published work, most of which is heuristic. There are some machine learning things where you need like a trained model. And I guess that's sort of a separate conversation because that gets into whether or not you want to share the data that you use to train the model. But in general, especially for heuristic-based algorithms and for previously published work, it's just sharing an effective implementation that's easy to use and easily scalable. And so there's no harm in sharing that. Actually, I think there's a huge bonus in sharing everything that we have because of what Lucas mentioned. If we can kind of agree on what we're talking about, and then we're not trying to, let's say, validate 500 versions of total sleep time with, let's say, a regulatory body at the same time across multiple companies, then we're good.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, I'm the PMO director here at DiMe, and we're moving forward this month to initiate a project to drive consensus for defining core measures for physical activity, and in a few months for sleep. And as we embark on this, driving consensus from your perspectives, any advice at this stage you would like to provide?
Yiorgos, do you have something right?
I mean, nothing jumps out at me. I think it's something that. So I know that across both, pharma companies like Pfizer, where we're doing some of this work, and then also there are device companies that are deploying algorithms, and they're pretty open about which algorithms they're using with references to published work. So I think just including, when you're describing a particular endpoint, maybe collecting, any relevant published work around the derivation of that particular endpoint. So there might be multiple ways of deriving a particular endpoint, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a different endpoint. So I think maybe just in general, a literature review of what methods there are for deriving a particular version of an endpoint, and then I think moving the conversation forward from there, because at least from there you're moving from a place of at least some kind of knowledge, some kind of base of knowledge.
Yeah, we're on the same page for we're doing similar work for Alzheimer's and related dementias, and for atopic dermatitis with nocturnal scratch. And starting with the literature review certainly is our methodology. Lucas, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I'm going to focus specifically on activity. And I think with the way that a lot of it is currently presented, there's always this focus on MVPA time or sedentary light time. But it seems like there's so many different cut points that people use. If you pick a study, if you pick a different paper, they'll be using a different set of cut points, basically, it seems like. And so I think there's been shown value there, but I think also that to keep an open mind and keep open the possibilities that there may be better endpoints for activity that are not so reliant on not necessarily like fully arbitrary cut points, but cut points that are potentially population specific or I don't know how exactly to put it, but they sometimes fit into their own special population that they were derived from. And so I think we've seen a couple of cases where we're either concerned about how well they're generalizing to this new population that they're not necessarily designed on for, or like that's some of the feedback we get from clinicians, or some cases where we don't see much variation, where we might expect to see a variation in those endpoints that are based just upon the cut points. So I think making sure to sort of expand beyond what's sort of potentially standardized, at least in like healthy subjects, and keeping in mind that it doesn't always apply particularly well, at least for activity. You know, I guess, yeah, so it's very specific to activity endpoints there, but that's sort of the experience we've seen with some of our data.
No, that's great. And yeah, activity is certainly a near-term focus for us. So much obliged for your responses.
Just wanted to see if anyone had any additional questions for our authors or comments. Last words. Awesome work, guys, says Thanos. Thank you.
Thank you, Thanos.
Lukas or Yiorgos, did you have any final thoughts?
I guess I would just say, like, if you have something, you know, we've released this open source. We are more than happy to either work with people if you feel like something is missing from here that you'd like to see, or you know, you're more than welcome to add contributions to this. It's all on GitHub, and should all be accessible. So yeah, so if you have something you'd like to add or something you'd like to see in this that you're not sure how you'd like to implement, please feel free to reach out or submit a request to add it as well. If you have an issue with something as well, you know, GitHub has the issues function, so please reach out if you have something. Yeah, I think that's what I would add.
Wonderful. And would you mind clicking to the next slide very quickly, Lukas? I am going to do so thank you so much for this session. We had some great questions, and I think this will be an amazing tool for a lot of our community. I know we have a bunch of people on the line that will probably take advantage of this. So thank you so much. I just wanted, before people start dropping off, I wanted to plug our next Journal Club session, which is going to be on November 2nd. This is a really interesting paper about Alexa. Should Alexa diagnose Alzheimer's? Legal and ethical issues with at-home consumer devices. So the author that will be here is David Simon from Harvard Law School to talk about this issue, and then DiMe's Pip Griffiths will be moderating and asking some questions. So I hope that we can join you, that you can join us for that. And again, thank you to our authors today, and thanks for everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you for everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It was nice.
Great. Bye.